Okay, it's recording. And set this back. Okay. Ow, that hurt. Okay, here we go. This is going to be the second of my videos, and what I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to take off from our local airport, and we're going to practice flying to and from a VOR beacon, and then practice landing using ILS coordinates and an ILS approach. So using our OBS indicator to determine our glide slope on landing and to make sure that we're on course towards the run we've selected. As far as pre-flight, the only information I needed to gather for this flight, because it's going to be real short, is the frequencies for the VOR, which I've got tuned into my standby position on my Nav1 radio. And I also needed the ILS frequency of the runway I'm going to be landing on, which I have tuned into my Nav1 radio now. And then I'm going to need the ILS runway heading of the runway I'm going to be landing on, which will be 172. And I just have to remember that or write it down as part of my flight plan. Okay, we're all set for takeoff. Let me go ahead and clean up the aircraft. Check my lights real fast. Those are all set. Okay, we're in the Cessna 172, so we're looking for a takeoff speed of 60 knots with 10 degrees of flaps. So we're going to go ahead and full power. Once we rotate, we're going to establish a positive rate of climb and then flaps up and then trim to keep that rate of climb. There's 60, rotate. Positive rate of climb, flaps up. The 172 has a best climb rate of 74 knots, so I'm trying to trim for that on the climb, and we're going to climb to 2,500 feet before we initiate our navigation maneuvers. Okay, so something like that. Climbing at about 700 foot per minute at about 75 knots, so that's about right. I'm going to go ahead and flip my navigation radio on to the VOR frequency, 112.80, which corresponds to the CWK VOR. It's a VOR that's used for departure SIDS and approach stars northeast of Austin. Passing 1,500 feet. And while I'm climbing, I'm going to go ahead and turn my OBS knob so that my VOR directional lines up with this center line, as such. Okay, so right there. And what that's telling me is that for me to fly towards that VOR, the most direct course is this bearing, which is 030. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the heading bug to the 030. Passing 2,000 feet, my climb and everything looks good still. 030, and then I'm just going to make that turn as my first turn. There we go, 030. Okay, coming up on 2,500 feet, so I'm going to throttle back a little bit, nose down, trim down. I want to be picking up airspeed, and we'll go for a cruising speed of about 100 knots. Continually trimming down. Okay, and then throttling back the power just a little bit and establishing level flight at 2,500 feet going 100 knots. I'm going to go ahead and lock the autopilot in at these settings, 2,500 feet. Okay. Now for me to continually fly towards that VOR, all I have to do is make minute adjustments to this directional to get new headings, and then make minute adjustments to my heading bug to tell the aircraft, or make minute adjustments using the yoke towards those headings. And what you're doing is basically drawing a line from your aircraft towards that beacon and continually redrawing it and telling whether you're flying on it or not. Flying over the Colorado River and Town Lake. And I'm making minute turns just to get this lined up again. I could also adjust the needle and get a new heading, which would be, looks like 028. So we could do that, 028. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell the aircraft just to do another climb. I want to climb up to 3,500 feet, just so we can get established on the glide slope on our return here, which we're going to do in a minute. My goal is I'm going to fly to the edge of Austin Bergstrom Towers airspace, and then I'm going to initiate a landing sequence, aiming for an ILS approach on runway 17 left. Should just be 3 turns that I have to do, unless I need to do more turns to shed altitude. And I'm 7 miles away from the VOR, traveling towards it on a bearing of between 025 and 030. Passing 3,200 feet, and I'm 6 miles from the VOR, and I would say I'm about 2.5 miles from the edge of the airspace. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait till it gets 3,500, I'm going to take it out of autopilot, and then I'm going to manually establish myself on the glide slopes and the turn radiuses. And there's 3,500 feet. I'm going to take it out of autopilot while it's trimming down. Reassert control of the aircraft just in case it wants to jump or anything like that. And then we're established on 3,500 feet going 100 knots, just back off power a little bit. And there's level flight. Now we're going to go ahead and switch thinking now, and we're going to move off of the VOR tracking and put the standby position, or the standby frequency, into our nav1 radio, which corresponds to our ILS approach. And you see that my OBS indicator springs into life again. What it's telling me right now is that the glide slope for the landing is below my aircraft, but that I'm approaching it, and that I need to turn the other indicator to 172, which would be the way I was going a minute ago. 16, 17, 71, 72. Okay. Now we're going to do a couple of things. We are on the glide slope for the approach, so we are going to go ahead and initiate our left turn, decrease power, trim down so that we begin to descend, as I do a series of turns to get myself lined up back with the airport. Now, I'm only concerned with the approach as far as the instruments go. Of course, you would use whatever approach you were supposed to. This really just applies to your last couple turns. Your base and final turns would be where you care the most about this. I'm going to go ahead and take off a lot of power because my speed is climbing excessively as I dip the airplane. Going to stop my descent at 2,500. Okay. Put power back on about 50%. And we're on what would be essentially a base leg. Now let me tell you what my instrument tells me. This tells me the glide slope is far above me, that my airplane needs to continue to maintain level flight or go up to intercept it, and that I'm way off on my turn, which is expected because I'm on base right now. I'll care about this needle whenever it's time for me to make a final turn. Hit 85 knots, go ahead and put the first stage of flaps. Trim the nose down a little bit to compensate. Now I'm pretty much going to fly in this configuration all the way on this huge base leg and back towards the airport. I could just now barely see the poppy lights in the distance. They give me a visual indication of what my instruments tell me. That's I'm below the indicated glide slope. Okay, now you can see the glide slope indicator is starting to drop down. I just want to use my controls using trim and power to slow the rate of change so that whenever I do intercept it, I don't just blow right past it and then have to drastically adjust downwards later. Much better to be above the glide slope than below it. It's much easier to descend the aircraft, especially on an approach, than it is to climb the aircraft on an approach. We are almost intercepting it now, as close as I want to get to it without passing it. So I'm going to start making sure that the aircraft is descending. Even if it's only descending at 100 or 200 foot per minute, that's fine right now. Just that it's not climbing and not maintaining speed. I'm going to go ahead and cut power because I'm trying to cut airspeed. At the same time I trim up, just so I can maintain that rate of descent, which is what I want. I know you probably can't see my instruments that well, but I'm using my approach at a speed of about 80-85 knots with one stage of flaps. And the glide slope is below me, and I'm falling about 300 foot per minute right now with 2,700 feet to go. And a little more than 7 miles from the airport. Cutting power even more. Going down to 1,700 RPMs. And we're going to go ahead and put on second stage flaps. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and adjust my airplane's orientation to get on this directional now. I'm close enough to the airport where I should expect to be able to. The glide slope's still below me, so I'm making sure that the airplane is nose down and falling. Watching my airspeed, I'm going to give it a little bit more power. You can see I'm starting to intersect the runway bearing. Keeping my attention on that and my airspeed. Airplane's wanting to nose up because of turbulence right there. I've intercepted the runway heading. And the glide slope's below me. Experiencing some turbulence. Fluctuations in airspeed of about 10 knots, give or take, or plus or minus. Nose down. Nose really wants to climb now. The glide slope is really far below me, so I'm going to nose down a lot. Power down. Okay, we're lined up on the directional pretty well, but the glide slope's still far below us, so we just want to keep the aircraft falling and make sure that when we do intercept it that we don't fly right through it. My airspeed looks fine. Even more turbulence. A little more power. Okay, you can see the glide slope starting to adjust. I just want to make sure that I don't stall the airplane as I slow that rate of change. I don't want the aircraft to climb, I just want to slow how fast it's falling. I manage the ratio of airspeed with vertical speed with my trim indicator and with power. And there we go. And then we just maintain that the last few seconds of the landing. I don't have to land right on the numbers, it's not important. It's much better to land softer than it is to land exactly in the right spot. Whoa. Trying to slow the aircraft down. It's not really wanting to fall too well though. Flare right before touchdown. And nice and easy. On the ground, flaps up. Okay, and then brakes as necessary, and let's pull off the airport. And that was a real bad approach. I should have had the glide slope lined up, I mean, very, very far out. Don't know why. I think a lot has to do with the wind. There's a really strong wind, and I'll take a look at it in the replay, but I was getting gust on the approach there of, 15 knots, which makes it hard to keep your glide slope. Anyway, that's going to be it. Thank you.
Look at where we're in cars.
Hold on. Everything's in my right order here. Where's Rengar? He got up there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that little shit.
He was up there earlier today with Trin.
How did he get up there?
I don't even know.
I mean, how?
I don't even know.